Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for what is basically the ultimate shortcut into relationship psychology.
It really is.
We've been handed this, a significant stack of sources, articles, studies, psychological research, all focused on one central theme.
And that is, what do men generally expect and, more importantly, genuinely need from a long-term intimate partnership?
Exactly. We're trying to go beyond all the cliches here and just pull out the most foundational and honestly often counterintuitive psychological nuggets. So, yeah, let's unpack this.
And our mission is really to distill this knowledge for you. What are the non-negotiable requirements for deep emotional investment?
Right.
And you'll discover these needs often bypass typical romantic ideals, and they center instead on deep psychological support, specifically around self-esteem, personal autonomy, which the research frequently just calls freedom, and the consistent experience of forward momentum.
Forward momentum. Yeah, I like that. This isn't just a survey of preferences. It's more like a framework for what? Sustained motivation. Emotional security.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So we've synthesized all this complex research into 7 core concepts that really define the landscape of what makes a relationship feel, worthwhile and safe.
And we should probably start with the most foundational elements.
The bedrock, yeah.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You are doing important work.
The stuff that allows a man to commit without feeling totally exposed.
We can call these the pillars of trust and personal space. They're kind of the initial barriers to entry, and if they aren't met, the whole structure of commitment just becomes unstable before it even gets off the ground.
Okay, let's start with the first one. It's arguably the most emotionally charged pillar.
Right.
The necessity of support and belief in him. The studies we reviewed are incredibly clear on this.
So clear.
A partner's genuine conviction in his abilities is what inspires him to become better. That's a direct quote. It's a profound vote of confidence.
It's so much more than just cheering. It's seeing the potential he hasn't even fully realized yet. And what the research really isolates is the devastating effect of the inverse, so constant criticism, these little micro-doubts, or just a general sense that his partner doesn't truly trust his judgment.
Especially when things are already tough for him.
Especially then, when he's struggling or facing a professional setback, this doubt actively drains his self-esteem. I mean, if the person closest to him constantly questions his capacity, it's a direct psychological blow to his ability to strive.
So the partner becomes a kind of psychological mirror, and if that reflection is always one of inadequacy, it just kills the drive.
It kills the drive.
But isn't it hard to maintain that kind of, unwavering belief when things are genuinely tough? How do the studies differentiate between, say, realistic concern and just destructive doubt?
That's the key question, and it comes down to the underlying assumption. Destructive doubt communicates a lack of faith in his core competence. Realistic concern, on the other hand, can be framed as support for the process. You acknowledge the difficulty, sure, but you reinforce your belief in his eventual success.
So it's about the trajectory, not just the current snapshot.
Exactly. The research highlights that the goal is to foster an environment where he feels safe enough to fail, knowing his partner still believes in his future, not just his current success rate.
Fascinating. Okay, so moving from that deep psychological backing, the next pillar is mutual trust and honesty. Everyone says trust is vital, but what does the source material reveal about the specific consequences when that trust is broken in this context?
Well, the sources, they really emphasize that dishonesty.
Like one subtle stuff.
Even subtle stuff, or things that are just perceived as manipulation. It carries an extremely high cost. I mean, emotional investment requires vulnerability, right?
Of course.
A man has to feel safe enough to lower his guard. And if that vulnerability is exploited, or if there's a consistent sense of, gaslighting or game playing, the psychological security of the relationship just dissolves almost instantly.
So it's not just about the big betrayals. It's about the constant low-grade insecurity that's caused by a partner who isn't open or reliable.
Precisely. That consistent openness is vital because it establishes a tangible sense of security.
Right.
If he has to constantly second-guess motivations or, verify stories, that intellectual and emotional labor starts to feel like a massive tax on the relationship.
A tax.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Honesty minimizes that cognitive load, which allows his investment to flow freely. When trust is there, the energy he expends is directed outward towards shared goals, not inward, policing the relationship itself.
That's a powerful metric. How much emotional energy is spent policing the relationship versus advancing it? Okay, now, Let's tackle a need that is constantly misinterpreted:
I know which one you mean.
the requirement for freedom and personal space. The research is so insistent that the desire for recharge time or individual hobbies or just solo decompression is emphatically not a sign of lacking love.
This is a core point about autonomy. Psychologically, men often require time for emotional self-regulation, and that happens through solitary activities or focused work away from the partnership.
And the research says what? That respecting those boundaries helps.
It more than helps. It suggests that respecting these boundaries actually makes him more open and loving when he returns. If he feels constantly monitored or constantly forced to engage, that pressure just infringes on his sense of self.
So if the relationship threatens his identity or his sense of personal control, he'll naturally withdraw to try and reclaim that lost autonomy.
Exactly. This separation is, well, it's necessary for emotional equilibrium. And the irony is that the more space a partner is given, the more psychologically whole they become.
Therefore, the more capacity they have to engage authentically.
Yes, that's it. The source material suggests that partners who view this space as an opportunity for their own growth rather than a threat to the bond, they end up with a much deeper, less suffocating connection.
It transforms a dynamic from codependence into interdependence.
Perfectly said.
Okay, that provides a really powerful frame for those three foundational pillars: genuine belief, transparent trust, and respected autonomy.
Let's shift gears now and talk about the core dynamics of communication.
Right. This next section is all about optimizing the communicative environment, turning interaction into a source of comfort rather than conflict.
The first, and I think most often violated concept here, is the necessity for a lack of criticism and pressure. We often critique to try and help someone improve, but the sources find that constant criticism ultimately makes a man feel he is never going to be good enough.
And that's the antithesis of the belief pillar we just talked about.
The ultimate contradiction.
It is. And why does that feedback loop fail so badly? The studies explain that when criticism is the default mode of interaction, it's not heard as constructive feedback.
It's heard as an attack.
It is heard as an attack on his worth or his capacity to perform. And men, according to this research, are much more likely to respond to that kind of stress with psychological withdrawal, the classic shutting down, rather than changing their behavior. So if criticism just results in withdrawal and emotional distance, what mechanism do the sources suggest for delivering difficult feedback without causing that defensive collapse?
They advocate for a complete shift in motivational strategy. So from flaw spotting to praise-based encouragement.
Interesting.
Motivation is just far more effective when it's delivered through trust and appreciation. Instead of saying, you never take the trash out, you focus on the instances when he does contribute and you reinforce that positive behavior.
Frame it around the positive impact he already has.
Exactly. And how expanding that impact would benefit the partnership. That's so much more effective than focusing on the deficit. It preserves his self-esteem while still guiding growth.
That is a highly actionable insight.
Yep.
Okay, now, tying directly into communication comfort, the sources highlight a preference for emotional stability in a partner.
Right. This is really about managing stress and predictability. The research notes a strong preference for logical reasoning over excessive emotional volatility.
And why is that?
The simple reason is that sudden, intense, or unexplained mood swings, they just confuse and stress him out. When the emotional landscape of the relationship is erratic, he loses the ability to successfully navigate it.
So he feels like he's walking on eggshells.
Constantly.
Wow.
Always trying to guess the right answer or avoid a sudden outburst.
And what's the cost of that volatility? It just sounds exhausting.
It creates enormous relational anxiety. A relationship should be a place where stress is co-regulated and minimized.
The safe harbor.
A safe harbor, yeah. When a partner is emotionally stable and uses calm, logical communication, the interaction environment becomes significantly more predictable and comfortable. The relationship then functions as a place where he can genuinely relax and be himself without fear of unexpected emotional storms.
So the preference isn't for an unemotional partner.
Not at all. It's for a partner who can manage her emotions and communicate needs clearly, rather than, through chaos.
That clarity in the signal, a calm, consistent frequency, is clearly a major expectation according to this research. It allows the partner to trust the environment. Okay, let's move to our final section, which is about the momentum of the partnership. The sources call it the trajectory.
Yes.
And it starts with the crucial need for shared growth and progress.
This moves us beyond the status quo. What the research reveals is that men psychologically don't want to just settle or exist in a relationship. They need to feel that they are actively moving forward.
Moving forward together.
Together, yes. The relationship has to feel like a shared vehicle for advancement and purpose.
This is where the idea of a deep dive really delivers. How is this bond strengthened in, practical terms? It's not just abstract hope. The studies detail specific actions. Setting goals, sharing achievements.
And creating joint plans and dreams. Those are the tangible mechanisms that foster this sense of shared unity. When we connect this finding to the need for belief and autonomy, it suggests the partnership must be an active project. If the relationship remains static, if they're merely roommates or co-parents without a sense of joint ambition, the research shows that dissatisfaction rises.
So shared progress defines the relationship not as a destination, but as a journey.
An ongoing journey where both individuals are collaborating toward a mutually beneficial future. Yes.
That momentum sounds like a psychological necessity. If the relationship isn't progressing, the instinct might be to abandon it for fear of stagnation. But what about the goals themselves? Do they have to be huge, like launching a business together?
Not at all, no. The sources clarify that the size of the goal is less important than the act of planning and working toward it as a unified front.
So it could be anything.
It could be planning a major trip, renovating a room, or even mastering a complex skill together. The vital psychological component is the feeling of being a team, sharing that challenge, celebrating the small victories, and collaboratively defining that future trajectory.
It's the joint investment of effort that deepens the bond.
That's it.
And finally, let's talk about the emotional atmosphere of that journey. Lightness and positivity. The sources heavily contrast heavy relationships with those marked by ease, humor, and laughter.
This speaks directly to the net emotional return on investment. I mean, if the relationship is defined by constant tension or exhaustive conflict, or feeling like every interaction is a negotiation.
Or an argument.
Or an argument, right. The psychological cost rapidly exceeds the benefits. The sources suggest that this environment makes a relationship feel profoundly heavy, and people naturally seek to escape or minimize contact with things that drain their energy.
The need for lightness, then, is fundamentally about making the partnership sustainable and desirable.
Absolutely. Positivity and the ability to simply relax, joke, and enjoy each other are vital components. It's that capacity for low-stakes, non-stressful interaction, the effortless connection that strengthens the bond over the long term.
If you can't laugh together,
if you can't unwind without underlying tension, the relationship transforms from a source of strength into a source of stress, which leads directly to psychological withdrawal.
That was a tremendous deep dive into the 7 critical psychological needs drawn directly from this research. We've covered the crucial necessity of support and belief in him.
The need for freedom and personal space, the requirement for transparent trust and honesty,
The desire for a lack of criticism and pressure, the preference for emotional stability.
and the foundational requirements of shared growth and progress, coupled with lightness and positivity.
A lot to cover.
A lot. And we have to conclude with the essential caveat highlighted by all the source material. While these are powerful general psychological needs identified in the research, every single person is unique.
Of course.
The real application of this knowledge isn't trying to enforce some kind of template, but using these 7 concepts as a starting point. The true strength of any partnership comes from the couple having an honest, open dialogue about how these preferences manifest for them individually.
That conversation is the practical application.
That's everything.
That's the most important takeaway. This is a map for dialogue, not a rule book for behavior. So given the intense emphasis on shared growth and progress as a psychological requirement for commitment, we'll leave you with this final provocative thought.
Okay.
If the partnership needs to be a journey of evolution, how might couples intentionally design joint plans, not just for external metrics like financial success, but for the partnership's internal progress, to satisfy this fundamental psychological need for constantly moving forward together? Something to think about. How you might incorporate that momentum into your own relationship's trajectory.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to overcome betrayal, break toxic cycles, take control of your relationship choices, read How to Deal with a Love Triangle. The link is below the video.